Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, wherever you are with different time zones and places in the world. My name is Sana Mustafa. My personal pronouns are she and hers, and I am the CEO of Asylum Access. And it's really my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome you to the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Impact Report launch webinar. And we are hoping with this hour to really join you and welcome you to joining our celebration of impact for 1 year. And before we do that and introduce my fellow speakers, I want to tell you a bit about us, about the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative and our story and why are we here. Back in May and April 2020, there was this amazing opportunity, was called the Chris and Lena Iconic Impact Award. And it was an award worth of $12 million for bold solutions on forced displacement. And at that time, Asylum Access, we convened a coalition of refugee-led organizations from Uganda, Colombia, Egypt, Lebanon, and Indonesia. And we've come together and we asked the question, as refugee-led organizations, what is the bold solution for forced displacement, as we wanted to seek this opportunity? And immediately, it was for us, it wasn't the what. It wasn't education, that the bold solution, it wasn't employment. The bold solution for forced displacement that we immediately all recognized and organically from the barriers and the realities we live in, it was the how and the who. It was shifting power and resources to those on the ground, to those who have the lived experience, who know what their communities need, who are flexible and change their services based on their community needs. The solution is shifting resources to them, that they should lead their lives and their affairs. And that's how we started the application process of the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative. And we engaged through the Iconic Impact Larsen Lam Award. During the application process, we refined our solutions more and more, and we won the award. We won the $10 million award in May 2021, after 1 year of building our relationship together and getting to know each other and investing in really thinking how this solution is not a solution for one country. It is a systematic solution. It's a solution that's really uprooting problematic structure in the refugee response system. It's a solution that's shifting power and resources to where they should have been 70 years ago, to refugee-led organizations. And that work has led us to arrive to this moment. It has been almost 2 years since the application process and the launch of May 2021. And we are here today to celebrate 1 year of impact only. And once you start hearing about the impact that we've done only in 1 year, we only know and we imagine what would have happened if this had started 70 years ago. Today, we will be talking about the impact of the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative and what happens when those who have the lived experience are finally leading their movement. And we will talk about the impact, how this is impactful, successful, efficient, and the ethical thing to do. And I have the pleasure to be able to share with you the impact here with my fellow panelists. But I want to take a moment to give key highlights of the things that we have achieved in 1 year. At the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative, and I have to emphasize that we never did that alone, and that's why we're joined here with number of those who have been supporting us, whether on the panel or outside of the panel. But we have unlocked $11.7 million directly in funding to 17 refugee-led organizations around the world. We're talking about $11.7 million, where we're still, other actors still debating about funding refugee-led organizations with $4,000. And the inability to do that. We have reached approximately, only through our 5 refugee-led organizations grants in the first cycle, around 200,000 people with direct dignifying services. And I will have to emphasize that we don't believe numbers talk to impact only. Numbers tell half the story. So maybe the important story for us here is also about how our community members across all race, ethnicities, religions, and gender identities and abilities indicated that they typically felt safe, understood, and respected while receiving these services from their respective refugee-led organizations. Our coalition members, the 5 refugee-led organizations in our coalition, have supported around 58 other refugee-led organizations with a variety of strengthening initiatives. we have engaged with many global and institutional actors in philanthropy and global institutions around really starting to correct the misperception about us as refugees being passive recipients of aid, as us being implementers, and also the misinformation around this being risky and this being complicated. And that also has led to major success. And you can read more about it, about the mindset shifting that we've been doing with our allies in our impact report. So there is really no specific words to really describe the impact that we've achieved. And I think most importantly, I want to emphasize that in our impact report, in this moment that we're celebrating this document doesn't only talk about numbers and doesn't only talk about the numbers of people we've reached and the key mindset shift that we did, but it also, there's a huge full section that talks about why, who we are, our inclusive practices, and being refugee-led led to this impact. And I think this is a very important, really, indicator of why movement led by those most affected are impactful, successful, and ethical. And with that, I want to start my conversation by introducing our key allies and people who have been with us on this movement and will be joining us in this conversation. First, I want to introduce, we have with us Hani Elristom, who is the Director of Program with the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative. We have Mohsen Hassan, who is the Awards Director at Lever for Change. We have Leblanc Brito, who is the President and founding member of Refugiados Unidos. And we have with us Sarah Smith, who's the Director of Legacy Initiatives with the Hilton Foundation. And we have a surprise intervention from Audrey from Porticus Foundation. And with that, I'm going to start my first question to Mohsen. Mohsen, you were part of Really's journey early on from May and April 2020, and you've engaged with us all the way until we won the award and after that. And so we are very curious to hear from you. What do you feel has resonated with Chris and Lena, our major initial funders, about our project amongst many other applications? And also, I would love to hear what resonated with Mohsen, with you, about the solution that we proposed.
Well, thank you so much, Sana, for having me, and thank you all for putting together this great panel. Looking forward to the conversation and just learning more. So yeah, as you said, we were part of this journey from day one, and as you all saw that, when we were talking to Chris and Lena about just thinking about how to design this project, it was very clear from the beginning that they wanted to do something different. They wanted to approach this differently. And as you know, this was something that was very personal and close to the Larson family, given that Lena herself was a former refugee. So she had those insights about how kind of business as usual doesn't necessarily always work. And so from the beginning, they were thinking about how can we empower and uplift refugees. And that's why you saw, even in the design, one of the key criteria that we used to really evaluate the strength of proposals and ideas was community driven, right? The role of communities in implementing, in designing, and really in the sustainability of the whole project, right? And rather than just simply consulting communities, right? So we can check a box in a form and say we had some focus group discussions and what have you. And then the other thing that the donors really cared about was also the durability, right? I think the key recognition was that a lot of times when we talk about emergency or forced displacement, folks tend to think primarily around the immediate nature of the support that's required, right? The emergency relief, which is very important. But for the purposes of our donors and the Larson Lam Iconic Impact Award, the focus was really on durable solutions. So that was really how we set out to design this project. And from the beginning, after multiple rounds of evaluation, your proposal came out as among the top solutions. And as we kind of continued to work with you all to refine this, it became clear now when we got to the awardee stage, right? So we had 5 really fantastic finalists. And what set you and your proposal apart was really 2 factors I'll mention. One was the potential for systems change, which you just mentioned, Sana, right? That one of the unique distinguishing factors about your approach was how you're going to do things differently and the potential to completely shift the system. You were calling for something very simple, which is let us fund those who are most proximate to these challenges, right? Not really a complicated idea, but very complicated, unfortunately. Or it's become hard for people to simply accept that notion, right? And especially how the system is designed, as you pointed out. So that was one key thing that we looked at. And it was very clear that the coalition's approach, the potential for system change was greatest. And then also we looked at how catalytic the funding would be for your organization, with the recognition and acknowledgement that a lot of funders are usually very hesitant to commit to funding refugee-led organizations directly, and especially at that level, right? Making a $10 million investment over 5 years is a huge sign and a huge signal to the sector. And it was fantastic that Chris and Lena were willing to take that step and endorse your approach. So that's really what resonated the most. And for me also, as well, as a former refugee, as somebody who moved to this country, while I was in high school, I shouldn't say this out loud, but we try not to be biased, but this really resonated with me because again, we understand the need for having proximate leaders. Proximity is so important, and I think in this day and age, it is. We need to move beyond having to convince people or donors that those who are actually impacted by these challenges we're talking about are most often the ones who best know how to approach it, are the ones who are going to be more creative about finding solutions through very difficult and very complex settings and problems. So that's really what resonated the most for me. Seeing also the diversity of the coalition. I mean, it was just fantastic. Think about all the key things that donors are looking for, right? Looking at impact, looking at proximate leadership, looking at geographic diversity, right? The fact that you had very strategically picked these 5 different countries across the globe. I could go on and just keep praising the coalition, but we were just it was clear that what you all were doing was very bold, was very ambitious, and all that was needed was for somebody to take a step and say, we're willing to support this. And we knew that after that, your work was going to speak for itself and other donors will join. And I'm so glad that today we're here and are able to celebrate your accomplishment, which is just the beginning, really. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Mohsen, for sharing that. And yeah, it was a risk, right? And it's like significant risk. Like it wasn't like someone gonna give us $1 million, it was $10 million. And so I want to recognize that the approach for the award itself, centering community was key for that. And also, I always say, I remember when we were on this site visit call with Chris and Lena and Libre for a Change team and our team, I think for me, as someone who's talks to so many donors and big groups, it was the first time that the majority on the call were actually refugees and not coming to inspire the donor, but actually leading the solution on this call. And so for me, that was one of the moments that I keep remembering every time I might lose sight of why we're doing what we're doing. So thank you, Mohsen. I want to move to LeBlanc. And so LeBlanc was one of the refugee-led organizations, the leaders who joined us at the beginning. When we reached out to LeBlanc in April, there was, so much at stake. It meant that we are asking for so much input and really investment from a refugee leader and their organization in investing a year of their time and capacity in designing this application. And LeBlanc, you said yes, and you joined us, and gladly it paid off. But we're very curious if you can share with us a bit more, and other refugee-led organizations, maybe they can hear that. What resonated with you? Why did you join our coalition and invested so much time and effort in building this initiative?
Gracias, Ana. Estoy muy feliz de estar en este espacio y para mí y para todo nuestro equipo fue muy importante participar en este proceso, ya que, como dicen ustedes, fue la apertura y el inicio para un reconocimiento a nosotros que trabajamos directamente con la población. Somos parte de la misma comunidad, en donde muchas veces no somos vistos ni somos tomados en cuenta ni en consideración para este tipo de procesos. Lógicamente fue un año muy fuerte, de un proceso muy grande, pero lo que nos dio ese poder y todo el visto bueno para poder formar parte de RILI fueron los principales objetivos establecidos y que inclusive están resaltados en nuestro informe de impacto, en donde podemos establecer 4 estrategias principales que son nuestros objetivos principales. Incluso nos destacan como fundación a nosotros mismos, porque es lo que hacemos como red y replicamos con otras organizaciones de sociedad civil en cada uno de los espacios donde estamos refugiados unidos. Y por esa razón dijimos que sí, como es la estrategia de crear un fondo para refugiados, de mismas organizaciones de refugiados para refugiados. Ya ese primer punto para nosotros era excepcional porque no existe en el mundo. Era un cambio verdadero del sistema. ¿Cómo crear un fondo de nosotros mismos y liderado por nosotros mismos para mismos refugiados? Esto fue un cambio completamente para nosotros que era histórico y que sí era una propuesta de cambio. Lo segundo, un programa de fortalecimiento hacia las mismas ORLs, es decir, que ellas se sintieran empoderadas, se sintieran con un cambio verdadero, pero también fortalecidas dentro de sus verdaderas capacidades, que muchas veces no son vistas ni en muchos momentos son consideradas dentro de estos procesos, sino solamente se busca a nivel burocrático que ya lo tengan y por eso se ven las grandes organizaciones, pero no se ven las pequeñas en donde necesitan más fortalecimiento para poder llegar a ser grandes organizaciones. El tercero, abogar precisamente por este cambio de sistema, abogar por estas organizaciones que son lideradas por refugiados y para ellos mismos. Esto era algo diferente porque este movimiento no existía o era muy pequeño y no era visto, no había visibilidad para ello. Y este era el momento de levantar nuestra voz y de seguir moviéndonos para que esto pueda ser posible. Y lo último, la generación de una evidencia. Esto es algo también completamente novedoso porque ni siquiera hay estudios sobre esto y nosotros estábamos proponiendo ese cambio en donde esto pudiese ir mucho más allá y si había inclusive académicas en donde mostraran la realidad de lo que ocurre con las organizaciones lideradas por refugiados para refugiados. Dentro de las mismas comunidades generamos los cambios y que eso no es visto ni estudiado, ni salen investigaciones sobre eso, sobre la realidad que existe dentro de los mismos refugiados. Así que eso fue lo que nos llevó a que tomáramos la verdadera decisión de estar aquí.
Yeah, thank you, LeBlanc. I think you're right about the frustration. We all come from so much frustration, but at the same time, our solution that we designed together is strategic and it's really addressing, as you mentioned, all different dimensions for systematic change. So I'm very glad you joined us, and I want to give shout out to our coalition, other coalition members, Besma and Zaytoun in Lebanon, Yarid in Uganda, Refugees and Asylum Seeker Information Center in Indonesia, and STARS in Egypt. So thank you all for all the work that you've been putting into creating this initiative. Now I want to shift to you, Sarah. So Mohsen was part of the beginning with Lever for Change when we were still in the application process, and LeBlanc was part of designing this application. Hilton came in towards before we launched, really, when we won the $10 million, and Lever for Change went ahead and tried to mobilize other funders to bring them along with us on this journey. And you were immediately the second major funder of really, and we can say it transparently here, Hilton has given the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative $2 million to launch our seed funding. So you joined us at a time before the impact report, before we've launched, and some could argue there was a lot at stakes. And so I'm very curious why Hilton joined this journey early on.
Thank you, Sana. It's so nice to be here with all of you. So, you know, for me and for Hilton, I guess I'll start with myself. You know, I have spent the last 25 years working with refugee leaders around the world and have had the privilege of seeing how, seeing them in action, seeing refugee-led organizations achieving the impact that you show in the report and that we all know. And I think that for me, it was in many ways sort of obvious. You know, this is funding a coalition like this, and funding refugee-led organizations is something that it's shameful it hasn't happened more in the past. And having seen the impact of refugee-led organizations around the world, I knew from experience that this would be something worth investing in. At Hilton, I had just started at the foundation, though I have been working for international NGOs my whole career. And so I'd also seen how international NGOs often get a lot of attention and a lot of resources. And so I was finally in a foundation role where I was lucky enough to feel as though I could put my money where my experience was directing me. And luckily I met Musin, and he told me about the project. And then I read the tremendous work that you all put into the design of the project. And it was very straightforward. You know, the project itself was extremely well designed. And for me, it felt as though this is exactly what philanthropy should be doing. I know that many public donors have certain kinds of constraints that would make them think that they couldn't fund this kind of thing. And so that's where I believe philanthropy can step in and invest in things that others might perceive as risky or might think are difficult to do. And philanthropy can show that this is the best use of resources. So for me, it was a real privilege to be able to do this, especially as the Hilton Foundation was starting up an initiative focused on refugees. And so for me to be able to say to our board, this was one of our first grants within the refugee initiative at the Hilton Foundation, and to say to our board, here is an initiative that we are investing directly in refugee leaders and refugee-led organizations, and investing in a fund that will then have this catalytic effect.
Well, it always takes someone in an organization internally to start leading change. So I'm glad Hilton, you joined Hilton, and I'm glad that our partnership has continued. I want to now move to Hani. And so we've designed the initiative. We received the funding from our amazing partners and supporters. And then we at the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative started putting together an implementation team. And Hani, you are our director of programs at Really. And you are a person of forced displacement yourself. And obviously for us, we believe that was important. Forced displacement is a skill, is required to do this job. So I would love to hear, how has it been for you? Why did you join the implementation team of Really, and how has it been for you to be part of this journey?
Hello, Sana. Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for the question. It's a journey, to be honest, and maybe I would like to start by a small story. So I have two reasons. First, the first one is on a personal level. So basically, I'm a refugee who was living in Lebanon for 12 years almost. And the past 7 years of my life, I was in a resettlement program with UNHCR. And in these 7 years, I was always identified with a barcode number I have. They only know me through this barcode number. And I always used to laugh at it and say that I'm like an item in a supermarket shelf where people can know me by putting me on the scanner. And in this 7 years of waiting, a lot of things happened, like the explosion in Beirut and all the difficult economic situation in Lebanon, and many other things. With the increase of tension, also there was an increase of tension inside of me, and stress and trauma that is becoming bigger and bigger. And for me, in that process of UNHCR, my trauma was not recognized, and I was asked to stay in a line for 7 years, waiting to go into my interviews, to over again and again to say my story and to try to prove to the person who's interviewing me, sitting in a room with an AC, that I deserve to live better life as a refugee who cannot go back home. and it was hell for me some moments. And I want to invite you, actually, everyone here, like, take 10 seconds to imagine yourself standing in a line under the sun or under the rain, waiting with a barcode number to get inside and to be asked over and over about your most traumatic experience related to war, just to be able to go and to live in a safe place. Let's take a few seconds to imagine that. How does it feel for you? I think it feels so bad, like I always felt. And when I came to Belgium, I was thinking that I don't want to work in the humanitarian sector anymore, because I was like sick of this broken system. But I heard about really from a friend, and I was like, wow, this is very ambitious, and I'm not sure if it works. It looks like, very, dreamy project. And I was like, I'm not sure if I want to apply to be part of the team or not. And then I thought this project is like a revolution for me. I'm coming from, like, the Syrian revolution, the Lebanese revolution kind of background. And I was like, this is a revolution for me to be able to shift this whole kind of sector. And I was like, maybe, remembering that image of me standing in the line, I was thinking, like, maybe I need a revolution. I need to be in a revolution to change it. And yeah, this is why I'm here on a personal level, because I want to be in a revolution that change the system. And the second one is because in my previous years, I started RLOs, refugee-led, like organizations in Lebanon, and I was like always asked to provide a local Lebanese partner to come with me to a donor meeting because I was not enough for them. And I was like, it was just frustrating. And I was like, how can I have access if I always need someone to kind of confirm me in front of these donors? So I think this is like mainly the two reasons that I joined really, for on a personal level and on a professional level. And it feels amazing after this 1 year with the impact we are doing. It feels amazing, and it feels like, yes, we can do a change. And yes, it is possible. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hani, for sharing all these reflections with us and putting us back to really why the movement should be led by us, by people who have the lived experience. And yeah, our frustration with the system. And I think like it really speaks to what you shared, speaks to our tone at the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative. Yes, we are political, and we believe this is a movement, this is a revolution, and we always demanding a radical change because it has been a radical what has been happening for 70 years. So we're not watering down our demands, and we are not, sugarcoating any of our demands, because we've lost already a lot, and we believe we are in a place to lead this change. So I'm so glad you are with us, Hani, on this journey. Now that we have kind of understood a bit more why those who've been part of this journey joined it in the first place, I want to go back to you, LeBlanc, and kind of start to understand now, what is the impact of this journey on you so far? So this, to my understanding, this grant you got through the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative, it was Refugiados Unidos' first grant. And so this is huge in many ways. And so we'd love to hear how this has been for the organization and what's the impact so far.
Gracias, Ana. Con las palabras que decía Hani, me conmovió mucho porque es una realidad, y es una realidad que vivimos en todo el mundo, en cualquier región y en cualquier parte. Y eso hace de que esta pregunta que tú me haces para nosotras ha sido muy importante, porque nosotras iniciamos, yo llegué a Colombia hace 8 años, huyendo de mi país de origen, de Venezuela, sobre la realidad que existe todavía, Y es una situación muy, vamos a decir, nos mueve mucho y nos movió tanto que fue la decisión de trabajar en la misma comunidad para nuestros mismos refugiados y nuestros mismos hermanos, donde tocábamos muchas puertas y trabajamos con las uñas y nunca nadie nos abría la puerta o la posibilidad de recibir subvenciones. Y esta primera vez de que la coalición y Really haya confiado en nosotros y hayamos tenido nuestra primera subvención grande y con una confianza en donde no nos ponían tantos límites burocráticos ni tantos procesos para poder lograrlo y llegar, y que el día de hoy tengamos un impacto muy grande, porque nuestra realidad también no es tanto de recibir la subvención, sino el impacto que logras en las comunidades, el construir comunidad en donde fortalezcamos las capacidades de las personas, creando ese pensamiento y ese cambio de empoderamiento, en donde ellos son constructores de sus propias soluciones, en donde ellos mismos se reconocen con sus competencias, habilidades y construyan su camino desde un empoderamiento más de un desarrollo sostenible, en donde ellos se sienten de que son parte de la misma comunidad, se integran. Hemos podido llegar a muchas mujeres, sobre todo, porque hemos tenido enfoques diferenciales, hemos podido ayudar desde un impacto de construcción de comunidad de mujeres refugiadas en Colombia, en donde ellas mismas han tenido posibilidad de tener emprendimientos, en donde sus hijos se han integrado a la educación, hemos tenido procesos de nutrición, porque tenemos mucha población que está en estado de desnutrición, y ese proceso ha sido mucho más empoderado con estos recursos que hemos logrado de Really, pero también hemos derrumbado barreras en estos procesos, porque también hemos mostrado dentro de las mismas redes que nosotros pertenecemos, haciendo entender que nosotros también somos poderosos y que precisamente las organizaciones lideradas por refugiados podemos hacer cambios importantes, y que se debe desmitificar los pensamientos que se tiene como que somos vulnerables y que debemos seguir siendo vulnerables o considerados como eso, y que no somos potencialidades ni que somos constructores. Y esto ha sido el cambio poderoso que Really nos ha aportado a nosotros con este ingreso económico, y que hemos podido fortalecer capacidades internas. Tenemos hoy en día más de 35 personas dentro de nuestro equipo. Ha sido maravilloso, en donde construimos en diferentes localidades en toda Bogotá, atendemos población en otras partes del país, y eso ha generado un impacto también en grandes organizaciones en donde hoy en día nos reconocen y nos respetan, y siendo liderados y siendo de la misma comunidad, y seguimos haciendo esa generación de impacto para que otras organizaciones puedan sentirse con ese mismo empoderamiento y con ese mismo fortalecimiento para que puedan cambiar su historia. Por eso damos las gracias a Really, porque ha sido maravilloso para generar un cambio en nuestra comunidad.
Thank you so much, LeBlanc, for sharing that. And I actually want to acknowledge that since we've started, like from LeBlanc and everyone else, like we're hearing about what we're trying to do here. What Mohsen said is proving the obvious, right? We're proving that those who have the lived experience should be leading. And I mean, I want to acknowledge the irony of us celebrating an impact report that proves that. And if we put this in any other movement context, if we put this on the women's rights movement, we are all here to celebrate an impact, an investment that proves that women-led organizations should lead women's rights movement. So this is why we're here. I just want to acknowledge that for a minute. I want to move to you, Hani. So according to our impact report, 30% of our grantees have never received a grant, and 17%, this is their largest grant. This is significant across 17 refugee-led organizations. 30 have never, this is their first grant, and others 70, this is their largest grant. So can you tell us a bit more about the inclusive ways that our grant making has allowed us to reach this, this level?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, First, before talking about our grant making, I think what is very, very special about the coalition is that the general, like, you know, ways of working. And first, I would like to start by saying that the way we kind of develop the foundation of our coalition is on having people with lived experience coming together to think, reflect, brainstorm, and design this process. And one of these processes is the grant making cycle. And when we talk about the grant making cycle, I cannot but start with the title of our grant, like our fund is RLO to RLO. It's refugee-led organizations to refugee-led organizations. And when we talk about refugee-led organizations, we should talk about them as well as organizations having difficulties in accessing funding, right? So they know better what it looks like for other refugee-led organizations to access funding. And this is why we're reflecting on these challenges and trying to find solutions for it. And one important aspect of it is to have flexible stream of funding, flexible application, flexible way where they can access funding. And we put in place some criteria for that. First of all, we work with refugee-led organizations. The organization should be led by refugees. We have a minimum criteria and like criteria for ethical guidelines, the way that they kind of do their work. Also on a financial level, like minimum criteria on you know, having a basic accounting system. But what is interesting that we never thought of having barriers related to an organization being registered or not, because we understand that in many countries these organizations cannot register for a legal reason. We did not put in mind that we need a bank account for this organization, because many of these organizations did not have a bank account. Also, we thought about like having a very simplified application where the applicants can just send their application, their proposal, and their language. It could be in Arabic and Spanish and any language they use in these countries. And our role, our duty is to find translation for it. They don't have to speak perfect English. They have to put together the idea they want to apply for, and that's it. It's our work and our job to facilitate this process. And also we don't focus on a thematic area. We don't say like we only work with the humanitarian or with like women development or with specific like agriculture projects. It is open for the projects that they identify, because they know better what their community needs. And also in our process, it is very important to say that the way we decide on the applications is also inclusive, because it is not a group of people from like one organization deciding on who should take this fund. It is a collective work from all the coalition members. We come together and very specific designed process of reviewing the applications and then selecting the qualified people, organizations, and then doing interviews with the applicants, and then selecting those who goes for the grants. But also we don't necessarily like refuse, like when we refuse someone, we don't necessarily like just tell them we cannot help you. We try our best to match with other donors, like what we did in Lebanon, for example, and in Egypt as well. So yeah, this is basically the way we think of inclusive grant making. The second thing I want to say about our inclusive way of thinking, or our way of working, is toward partnerships. Lublanc mentioned earlier about our strengthening program. And here where we talk about strengthening program, we talk about an inclusive way of bringing us as coalition members with the refugee-led organizations and refugee leaders we work with on a similar level to talk and to have conversations peer-to-peer on ways to kind of develop or ways to work on strengthening our capacities to be able to absorb more money or to be able to manage more grants or to facilitate, enhance our processes. And this is not like a top-down process. It is like peer-to-peer process where we value the capacity that is already there and we try to strengthen it by linking the refugee leaders to other refugee leaders and the network we have. And in many ways, we learn a lot as well from the organizations that we work with.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, this is basically what I can say about it. I want to refer to our impact report. We have the full detailed information about the ways of working, about our grant making processes, and also about our strengthening program. Thank you, Sana.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you. And I think this is a reflection of when the solution is designed by those who've experienced the barriers over and over and over again, you design a solution that really addresses the dimensional barriers. And I'm so proud of that. I'm also proud of our due diligence. We've been able to do all of this inclusive participatory grant making while living up to our due diligence and doing this legally and safely. So speaking of that, I want to move to you, Sarah. You know, there's a perception that directly funding refugee-led organization is complicated, is actually risky, and it's impossible to do. And yet Hilton has done it, not only through directly funding Greeley, but also Refugiados Unidos is a refugee-led organization that also you have directly been funding, amongst others. So what has it been, what made it work for Hilton? How is it working for you?
Sure. And, you know, I think, again, we're in a foundation, it is, I'll acknowledge, different from some donors, and every donor has its own constraints. And so to me, it's really about funders realizing they're the ones who have the constraints, and the funders are the ones that have the policies that need to be worked through. That it shouldn't be the refugee-led organizations or any organization that has to change itself in order to meet certain requirements. It should be, to me, the other way around. And I think, you know, for us, we've heard, and Hani described so much of this, but over and over again from organizations that they need more support for just basic operations, things like audit and finance, things like HR systems, and support for data collection, in part because often these organizations are constantly asked to provide data for international institutions. So, and they're asked for to represent refugees in ways that takes time and money, I think the other thing that we hear so much is that they need more time. So refugee-led organizations are expected to do a lot in a very short period of time, but aren't given the money to implement over a longer period of time. So those are the things that for us as a foundation have been really important to live by, to fund for longer, to fund those operations. And, you know, I've built budgets. You can put these things into budgets and demonstrate how they're affecting the organization and how they're enabling an organization to do its work better. And I think funders just need to help organizations do that.
I think I want to quote you forever is that we need to change for our laws. They don't need to change for us. And I think this is the opposite of the continuous demand, on philanthropy and with engaging with our laws. Why don't you register? And why don't you do this? And why don't you become an institution instead of us changing our applications? So thank you for saying that, Sarah. I want to bring in Audrey, who's the portfolio manager of Porticus Foundation. And Audrey, thank you for agreeing to join us and share your perspective. With Porticus has just recently designed and launched a new strategy for people on the move. And your new strategy at the foundation centers and recognizes also the importance of refugee leadership. You're a partner of Really, and so we would love to hear from you. What has informed this strategy and what are your hopes to achieve with this strategy?
Thanks, Anna, and thanks everybody for having me. I think very simply what has informed our strategy is really talking with and learning from leaders. As an organization, Porticus is committed to participation across all of our work, but when we started to think through what we would be doing under the People on the Move, so-called portfolio, we, the staff, very much agreed early on that the expertise of people with lived experience needed to be central to our work, not only in terms of informing it, but also in terms of what we should support. And to go back to what you and Sarah said, perhaps it's because it's obvious, perhaps it's because we have that kind of personal commitment, but it was there to start with. However, what we also recognized was that we did not necessarily feel that we knew enough about how to make this happen, and even perhaps less so about how to do it well. So we engaged in a process of learning, a 12-month process where we partnered with a number of organizations, refugee migrant-led, including colleagues at Asylum Access, but also others around the globe. And what we did was to develop a kind of learning framework around two issues, leadership and movement building, as easy and as big as that, with really the intention to learn, to be helped in doing this work and living up to our commitment to those two issues better. So that's why we also asked our partners what they hoped and expected funders to do. And as you would expect, a lot of rich learning emerged from that. And I guess I want to kind of perhaps draw three that have been picked up already by other speakers, but that I try to really remind myself of on a continuous basis. And Sarah just said the first one, which is, if you do this work, do it with a sustained commitment. I think there was a recognition that RLOs need time. They need time to build and nourish their relationships across the ecosystem within which they work, with funders, with partners, with allies, and we can be a helper in making that happen. We've been also encouraged to fund support to reduce risk and increase safety within the movement. And that also is something that we're keen on not forgetting. I think the last one is to provide support to spend time together, to celebrate, to grow joy for people in harsh circumstances. And this one, I really feel motivated by it. And I think that's why we're so excited to be in advanced discussion with Really about funding, because you have created something, and that's a something with a big S, but something that will allow us to really realize this and to do it better than we would if we were to do it ourselves. So to conclude, I think in terms of the hopes I have, I think for Porticus it's that we continue to walk the talk, really, step by step, in an informed way, but also with generosity and with openness, which is everything that I think really helps us, and other partners in the movement help us do more and more so. And for the movement, it's really, and really within the movement, it's really that you receive increased support to continue doing what you do best, which is help people and shift systems. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, thank you so much, Audrey, for sharing this. And I want to echo two things you mentioned, really about the relationship building between, donors and refugee-led organizations. There is a power imbalance, and so investing in trauma-informed and building the relationship and mitigating the power dynamic is important. And I think really it's been amazing for us to engage with many of you as partners and as peers in many ways, not creating that power dynamic. And it takes two parties to create this kind of culture. So I think this is a very important thing for relationship building. And as you mentioned as well, no one has to do this alone. You know, like no funder and no RLO and no ally has to grapple with the question of how to realize and promote refugee leadership alone. There are so many collaborations. It's a movement. We should work together, and we should come to this with curiosity. And with that, I want to move to this last question on reflections to Mohsen. Mohsen, so you, Lever for Change, played a key role in really facilitating this investment of $10 million in the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative. And so now it's been a year and a half, and you've read our impact report. How does Lever for Change and our initial donors and yourself feel about this investment almost 2 years into it?
I think first it's just a feeling of excitement. You know, I remember going through the impact report, and it was just impressive to read about the numbers. For example, how many people you've been able to reach and to do this work. So, you know, on one hand, the impact is there, right? For those who are a little bit maybe hesitant to see, oh, you know, would like to wait and see. I urge them to read this impact report, because you will be blown away by how efficiently the Really Coalition was able to do this work, and also just the wide reach that you had. And also out of, you know, usually a much cheaper cost, right, than it would usually take if we kind of just went along the traditional systems of doing this work in the humanitarian system. But I'll just point out one thing that for me really resonated is in reading the report, not even just the numbers, but how intentional you all were about, you know, working with communities and centering proximate leaders. I remember reading the part about the evaluation and the external impact reports that you have done, and how even at that process, right, the recognition that a lot of these systems are typically, you know, informed by very outdated, you know, imperialist kind of notions about communities, right, and what it means to engage. But you all have been very intentional to just do no harm. And it's been beautiful. I was just reading and I was so impressed, right, that you guys are walking the walk, and not just talking about, you know, we're doing this intentionally, we're community driven in all aspects and not just one or two aspects. And for me, that has just been fantastic to see that you all are living all the values that you've talked about, and you're actually putting that into action. And it's such a wonderful example, I think, to other organizations who are looking to do this work in a very intentional way, in the right way. And for me, that's what has just been so impressive about this whole approach. And this is only a year and a half into it. So, you know, I'm only more curious and excited to see what you all will be able to accomplish after 5 years, and, you know, hopefully even surpass some of the numbers that you had initially kind of put down. Not that, you know, that's the most important thing, but I think that's just going to show to those who are not convinced yet that this is the way to go. And we really need to you know, kind of stop having these perceptions of risk and, you know, the hesitation that usually comes with working with proximate communities. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. And we are only here because we've been uplifted by so many of you, and those who are not here as well. And I want to recognize that. We have 4 minutes left. And before we leave, I just would love to hear from each one of you. What's your message? What's your final thoughts and message, whether it's some personal message or recommendations? So maybe I will start with you, Hani.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sana. It was very nice to be here with all of you. So I have two messages, maybe one for funders and donors. And I would say, like, never underestimate refugee leaders when you think of solutions for refugees, because we are the most proximate people to talk about, you know, our communities, right? And consult with refugees, include them and resource them. And if you have barriers for resourcing refugees internally in your systems and your organizations, come to us. We can have a talk about it. We can share our experience. We can also, you know, you can directly fund through us, refugee-led organizations. And my second message is for other refugee-led organizations. If you want to be in this.
Oh, Hani, you're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I don't
Now
know.
we can't hear you. We lost you when it was your message for the RLOs.
Yeah, I mean, if you are an RLO, talk about this movement. Remember, you can create change when you claim your right in decision making when it comes to your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Hani. Sarah?
Thanks, Sana. Thanks, everyone. I think first I'd just say it's for donors, especially out there, it's not that complicated. Funders are complicated, but refugee-led organizations are problem solvers. And so it just fund them. Secondly, I think differently about coalitions. I think Musa made this point, but this coalition is very unique, but I also think that refugee-led organizations in particular work really well together. And so I think funders can also incentivize that kind of work or incentivize competition. So what I'd say is please don't incentivize competition and instead incentivize these kinds of coalitions, because naturally these organizations work extremely well together. And then lastly, I think we really do need to continue to fund evaluations, but not to prove the worth of organizations, and in particular to prove the worth of refugee-led organizations, but instead to help all organizations know what is achieving impact for clients. Because what refugee-led organizations want to do most is say to their clients, this is what has worked, and this is what we have delivered for you, and this is what's not working, and this is what we need to improve. And thanks again, Sana, for having me.
Of course. Lou Blanc?
Gracias, Ana. Bueno, todos han dicho ya lo más importante, pero quiero destacar 2 puntos esenciales, sobre todo para los donantes, es que comiencen a vernos con mucha más confianza en estos procesos. Muchas veces hay dudas o hay miedos con considerarnos a nosotros como parte de este proceso o que no somos constructores verdaderamente. Creo que el cambio en el poder y el cambio también en creer en nosotros es donde está la ciencia y está el efecto donde pueden cambiar el sistema y los procesos también para bajar la burocracia y poder darnos a nosotros las posibilidades de crecer y de demostrar que sí somos posibles y constructores. Adicional que dentro de este proceso los donantes tienen ese poder para hacerlo, porque ellos pueden generar sus mismos cambios internos. Y lo segundo, para las organizaciones lideradas por refugiados, para refugiados, lo más importante es que sean parte de este movimiento, que ellos mismos son constructores de este proceso, que nosotros cuando nos unimos y cuando somos parte y mostramos nuestro impacto verdadero y demostramos que tenemos capacidades, fortalezas y que estamos construyendo de forma diferente en cada uno de los espacios donde estamos, vamos a hacer el cambio. Ya nos están escuchando, pero tenemos que unirnos para que nos sigan escuchando más fuerte y para generar verdaderamente el cambio en el sistema. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Lou Blanc. I know we're already over time, but I want to hear your final thoughts, Mohsen, before we close.
No, I'll just make this very quick. I think I agree with what everybody said. Yeah, my message would just be that, I think to those who are on the donor side, this is the right thing to do. This is the right way to go about doing this. I think I remember in your virtual site visit, Sana, one of your partners highlighted the absurdity of, having to convince, or if you had a situation where folks are working kind of on women empowerment, but the organizations are led by men. Like that today, we're at a point in the world where it's like, that doesn't make sense. So why do we continue to not make that connection when it comes to refugees, right? So this is the right thing to do. So please, and the evidence is out there. So just do it. And I think for refugees, for me, my message to you all is please keep doing what you're doing. I love how unapologetic you are about how you go about this work, and how you see that is kind of some of these are the best ways to have impact. So please keep doing this. Please keep centering your clients, keep centering the communities that you're serving and you're working with at the heart of the work, and the resources will come. I think this is a great approach to just kind of do this work as how you see best. And hopefully I think there's slowly building a momentum among donors who will be supporting. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Mohsen. Great note to end with. And so thanks to Hani, Audrey, Lublanc, Sarah, and Mohsen. And thanks for everyone who joined us and stayed 3 extra minutes over time. We appreciate it. You can reach out to us if you want to join the movement. It's never too late. It's actually the beginning. So thank you again, and wish you great days wherever you are.
Thank you.